No niin. Nyt lähtee. All right. Welcome to this Finland Azure User Group presentation. We have some smallish technical issues here, and well, hopefully we are now live. So today we have Joosua Santasalo here with us. He's Azure MVP and knows a lot about security, and he will be presenting about Azure AD. Joosua, could you still show the slides? So just as a brief look up at what these sessions actually are. So we have been doing these 30-minute to an hour sessions for Finland Azure User Group during the pandemic here. And these are just something that a person from the community comes and presents something that they have learned lately. And if any of the people watching want to present here, please feel free to contact me on Twitter, for example, or anybody from the community, and they can pass on the message and we'll set up a time for you. And you can find Finland Azure User Group on Meetup and also here on this YouTube channel if you want to watch the previous presentations. And without further ado, Joosua, take it away.
Okay, I guess the screen is visible, same slide. And just to clarify on the agenda, I do have Azure AD, but it's just one small part. So say this is more about general Azure security and looking into two areas, the resources in Azure, logging and Azure AD. So hopefully nobody will be annoyed by this, let's say, other subject. Yep. Okay. So quickly about me, I've been doing this work around 10 years. I focus a lot around developer-driven projects, but also a healthy amount of IT pro background. And there might be a strange situation where the customer actually has some IaaS resources in Azure. So even in those cases, I try to do my best. Obviously, I have a background also on the IT pro side. So that comes from there. I've been doing bug bounties for MS for about 3 years. And there are, if you want to go and look at, there are public security researcher acknowledgement for 3 particular different events. Unfortunately, nothing that is publicly disclosed, but there's a mention on the MS side. I do quite a lot of blogging also at securecloud.blog. I'm probably gonna go through some examples via the blog also during this meeting. And this is sort of best format for me to demonstrate something. For example, the solution here I'm going to show today is already published as a blog and a GitHub repo. But yeah, that's a short introduction and a bit about my employer, Nixu. I think this is kind of good to give an idea. So I work at Nixu. My daily work is, I kind of like to tell that it's a hobby, because sometimes I think that when the real work starts, it's been so cool. So working around the stuff I'm presenting here today. But yeah, probably most of you know Nixu, but here's a good idea. We're about 400 large security company, and I'm part of the cloud service business unit. So these 2 slides, or maybe these were the, let's say, structured part of the presentation. The next is basically going through a bunch of tools I have here, and I have live demos. they could be a catastrophic failure. I've tried to prepare for that by also having a live versions which are running already as a services in Azure to do some demos. But I was thinking about deploying at least one of the solutions during the demo. So if you see me here in the meeting, very silent, staring at the screen, that's me deploying a solution just to kind of go through what the solution might be consisting of. And I guess the chat is active, so if you feel something is missing on the demo or so, just write the question there. I'll try to take a look. So on the agenda, what is the most secure resource type in Azure? Why do logs matter? Those two, and some general areas that can be greatly improved. So just quickly showing what kind of solutions we have here. One is for automatic cleaning of labs and so on. The base idea is that the most secure resource in Azure is that which does not exist. So if you have services which you're trying out or services which are clearly already expired, the best way to secure them is to lock them down, or even better, delete. That's the most secure service you can have in Azure. Then if I would look a typical situation where there is suspicion of a breach or anything that even looks fairly malicious, unfortunately, in the majority of the cases, the logs are not enabled. And one of the solutions I'm presenting here is a solution which tries to alleviate that part. And I think we could start with that. And if we have time, we'll come back to these slides here. Maybe some words about generally what I view Azure like. It's very much attack surface for somebody who is possibly thinking about attacking the service. So Microsoft offers a great way to protect these resources, but it does take some work. You have to ensure that the services, when they communicate with each other, cross-service communication, you would prefer managed identities, not using something that bypasses Azure Airbag. And in case that managed identity gets compromised or somebody figures out the way to get the token outside of the communication, then you'll have also network restrictions where the only way that token can actually create a damage is through that service. So those cases as well. But I would quickly go through the first solution here. So let's go to Azure Auto Diagnostics. So the base idea of this solution is that Microsoft offers 3 ways to enable logs in Azure. One is via Azure Policy. That is actually the preferred way to do it. But it takes a bit work because each of the diagnostic categories goes through a different policy. So there is no catch-all policy available. So I've seen a lot of cases where the governance strategy is being worked on, and the end result is that no logs are enabled because we're still working on the best way to deploy this through policy. So my kind of message here is that don't wait. Even if you would be doing this from the GUI, please enable the logs. And I'm going to show one way to enable these logs on one of the further demos very soon. So the main idea is to do this automatically. And even better than deploying logs, as I said before, is if you don't use the resource, you would delete it. That's the kind of best version. You would still retain the logs that were there in the life cycle that preceded the event of deletion. So I think we could start with going through a demo where I create resources which have a retention period. And I think the best way to do this, since the deployment takes some time and we actually started to, is to pull up the install demo here. So let's open that from a standby. The screen share will drop for a while. So just take checkpoint of this part so we can get back here if needed. So let's start from the standby here. And I also noticed a funny thing when I was doing these demos, Windows subsystem for Linux, which I'm using to run the functions runtime and node, it does not like the use of snapshots. So I'm just bringing up the screen here in a few seconds. Let's see where we get from here. That's good. Okay, and the screen share should be coming back very soon. Let's see if I can deploy some resources, so just bear with me for a while. This should be good. And anyone wondering where the screen is, it should be coming back very soon. Okay, and I'm seeing the screen here. Maybe Pasi could say or click somewhere, because I restored the computer from a snapshot to go through the next demo.
We see base VM on VS Code.
Great. So the idea is to take a look for a bunch of settings I have here and create a resource. So let's create Azure storage account. Oh yeah, I have to get the location here also. West Europe, let's say, okay, also the resource group name, I have to take it from here. Let's see if I have it now here. That's better. Shouldn't take long. Okay, so I created Azure resource. I'm using tags here, tag of 0 minute. And once the tag has been evaluated by the Azure timer function, it will create me a message here, which is posted on the Finnish Azure Group Teams page, which I created for this demo. And basically, I can approve the deletion of the resource from here. So let's see how fast the resource comes here into the automation once it's been created. So it's 0 minutes now. And this is always a bit scary. I'm doing F5 and I'm adding some breakpoints here to just show what's going on the function itself. So let's see where the breakpoints are. I have one for error. Hopefully we wouldn't see that because otherwise I'm just going to show what I would have here as an end result. And I have one for successful posting of the message to the teams. So let's see. Okay, and now let's invoke the service. So now the first batch of data came in. I have a breakpoint somewhere here. Let's see if we get anything out of the data. And yes, there should be something on Teams any moment now. The data itself, as you can see here, is the storage account we just created, or one of those. I might have few of the expired ones as well. So let's actually take a look which service it is. It's called expiring. So let's have a look when it was created. just to make sure we are deleting the resource I created. So let's see. I think this is an older resource here. Let's just refresh the portal. Yeah, it's here. And the creation date, as you can see, is 2 minutes old. So this is where the solution is reading the date when it's comparing it to the age value. So you can see the retention has been set to 0 minutes. So now I should have message here. It was posted 1 minute after the creation, and I can just request deletion for the resource here. And it's going to other function now. Within about 1 minute, the resource is deleted. So this is the most secure way you can run Azure, is actually not to have any extra resources which you're not aware of, and putting retention time, especially to testing services, is a really good practice, because you can either automatically let them clean up or go through an approval workflow, which is just telling that when your old resources are gone. And now let's see if we have the account itself. We should not be seeing much here. So you can see the resource is gone. So this was the first demo I had here. The main idea is just not to repeat myself too much, but if you have services which you're especially using for testing, or you know the lifetime of the service, you could even go as far as 2 years. The solution will pick up the retention time from a tag, and it will delete then based on that tag. And you will just see a bunch of expired resources at that point. So that was my first demo here. And the solution is very simple. It's based on 2 functions. Here I'll just quickly terminate the current one. I'll show this solution on portal. So let's go to functions. So we have deletion service here, which is basically the service that deletes, and I was running locally the timer, which just creates the batch of deletable resources, and it will send then a link to the delete service, which I'm invoking from Teams. And it's basically just these 2 functions here. So that was the first demo. I'll stop the screen share for a while, and I'll go into another demo. Or actually, let's go through some of the slides here. And Pasi, how much we have time at this point? We're about 20 minutes on. I'd like to show a couple of other things as well.
Yeah, we can go for 40 more minutes. So
okay, great. Let's go back into the presentation. Okay. Yeah, so let's open the particular slide from the presentation itself. Basically, just quickly showing the solution we were talking about and some reasons. So bit about logging. This is with a hefty part of sarcasm, but this demo I just showed below, would be a classic situation where there is a POC environment. These are the previous reasons why there would not be logs. So good thing is that even if you don't have logs, most of the time you're not attacked. But when you're attacked, or if you have been attacked, there is nothing on the log, so it's kind of hard to tell that as well. So the log part here, which I have on the demo, is the Auto Diagnostic solution. And let's see if we can spin this up. This takes around 15 minutes to do an automatic log update. So what we're going to do actually is just create some random resource. Let's say see if I have something here which I could quickly create. And this is what I noticed today. If I want to keep the authentication on VSL open, I'll have to do something like this to resync the time. Otherwise, I would have had a really nasty demo today because the timing was not correct once I opened the computer back from snapshot. So let's deploy something here and let's see what I have here. Okay, I think I'll have to maybe open this as a demo too. So just a second. The screen should be resuming very soon. That's good. And let's create a resource here. So this is the data from the repo I just showed earlier. Let's create a random resource which is very quick to deploy. And that kind of resource would be a public IP in Azure. It's almost instantaneous when it's created. And let's see what happens. Oh, yeah, this is what I did show earlier. So let's spin up the VSL once again. Well, I've been doing a fair deal of live debugging in my day. So let's see what happens here. VSL should be coming back. Okay. Yeah. So it most certainly does not like bringing it back from the snapshot. That's not a problem. Let's just deploy some new resource. Before I do that, I'll define some variables here. Create a new random resource group. Okay, that's good. And then let's deploy a couple of solutions there. So this takes around 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes even a bit more. So I'm going to put this into baking and go through another demo. But I'll show quickly before we come back to these resources that what will happen from the automation side. Let's also, once the key vault is deployed, let's also deploy a public IP. Shouldn't take long either. Yeah, that's it. And then the public IP. And as I said, if you want to test a fast deployment in Azure, deploying a public IP is very, very fast. This almost instantaneous. And this was the group we just created. So we have here at this point, at least it's showing already the key vault. So basically, once the automation has run its course, the diagnostic settings here will be updated just like they would be updated by a policy. But the difference is that we don't need to maintain policies for resource types. Any resource that has the diagnostic settings API available, which is a good majority of the resources, will be updated automatically. So I'll just bring up some previous solutions I created. So basically, once it's gone through, you would see here created by automation tag, and it's going to log analytics after that. So But let's keep eye on these two resources here, and just for a while also take a look for the Auto Diagnostic Solutions we had previously here. So App Insights is our friend. It will tell what kind of data it's processing and when. So where's the live metrics? It's here. Okay, let's just take a look on the distinct messages on the logs. Taking a good while to load, but luckily we're not in a hurry. Let's do Control F5. Okay, it's most certainly doing a good deal of refreshing. Let's see if the previous window is a bit better. Loading. Okay, not much better. Okay, that's a bit better. So now we already have data. So once the Event Hub tells that there is a new creation event, this function will pick it up from the Event Hub trigger. And basically it will do something like, let's see if we have any previous event here. Okay, let's go into places, distant message. Yep. And here we should see an update once there is one. So here is events. It's basically seeing, and basically it's just saying when it initiates the update. So you would be seeing something like this. And let's just do a random search for something like this. And let's go for last 4 hours. Yeah, so here we have, and basically when it's showing that it's checking the subscription, typically it's about 1 minute from there. So I created one storage account before this meeting, and let's see if there's a correlation now between the two solutions. Let's also look at what did we create some time ago. So this is also something we should see somewhere around within 15 minutes of the deployment. Hasn't been more than 5 at this point, but let's still see. Okay, that's not yet there. And let's say while that's loading, I'm bringing up the presentation here. Let's take a look on the live side. So this is looking good. The storage account, sure which one we created. I think it's not that one yet, it's the public IP. Here we have also a resource check going on. So resource groups, right? So now it's tracking the resource group that was created. That's my guess on a quick basis. So shouldn't take much longer to see these two resources actually having automatic logs enabled. Let's have a look. But yeah, as I said, around 15 minutes is what it takes when it's done. So I'm also bringing another window here. The Azure portal isn't very keen to refresh either. So let's just keep this one running here and check if we had the, this is looking good. This is the public IP address we just saw there. Yep, 9388. And this is 9388. So once it's past checking, it should be there. Just our browser is not liking to open another window. So let's see if we can do something about that. Okay. Yeah, it's taking its good time just to show something, and I wouldn't be closing this one either. Let's see if I can open it on another window and share that window just to show, because then we are completed with this demo. Yeah, that's good. Let's look up the resource name here from the log. Public IP address 9388. Yeah, okay, it seems that the Azure is definitely not refreshing on that session, but it should be here very soon here.
Yeah, the new screen you are showing is just gray.
Yeah, I know. It's because I probably put the second window, which I'm bringing up to show the actual result of the automation. So yeah, I'll quickly show the result. So I had another window here open. It's the resource we just created. So around 10 minutes, it took this time, maybe less. Now we can see that there is a log destination created. So anything you create will get automatically forwarded to log destination of your preference. And you can do this also with policy, but as I said, in policy, you also always have to keep up with new resource types. So Azure policy does not have a way to do this on a dynamic basis, whereas this solution does. Obviously, if you had a perfect or even a good governance practice, you would probably create a predefined allowed solutions, and those solutions you could easily, in the DevOps pipeline or any other solution, deploy the log setting. So if you are in a, let's say, in a mature kind of setting, you might not need this solution. But any other case where you're seeing that you have resources that do not have logs, and you know that those resources might contain something, at least on the minimum, a proof of breach at some point in time, this is a perfect solution for that. So yeah.
Okay. Question regarding the 10 to 15 minute timer. What is causing that delay there? Is it a polling rate?
That's really good. That's not the polling rate. It's basically when you create the diagnostic settings for the event hubs, there is 2 to 20 minutes delay before the event actually comes to the event hub. And then, as you probably know, there is no, I'm not using a timer on the function. I'm using event loop binding. So basically, I don't know what is the complete thing that Microsoft is doing behind the scenes when you're choosing an event hub binding, but I've been testing event hub bindings when I sent the data to this solution, and it basically picks up it immediately. So it's basically the time when it's propagated to the activity log. So once it sees that event in the activity log, and once that event is forwarded to the event hub, then it's picked up by this solution. So really good question. I would say 2 to 20 minutes, at tops 40 minutes, but it's still a very short time compared to just forgetting that diagnostic setting forever.
Indeed. Thanks.
Yeah, but that's a good question. And just generally on the Azure function side, if you use event hub binding, my experience is that it's very fast in a sense when there are new events. in the Event Hub. So it's mostly about the activity log delay here, and even that's not much. This is 5 to 10 minutes in my experience, but there is some small additional delay for those events to be available in the Event Hub. So let's get back into the something else. I'll stop the screen share just for a second, and I'll kick out another scenario, which is kind of cool. So I think most of you are using some sort of CI/CD. I definitely know Pasi is using some sort of CI/CD, and this solution, on the other hand, is a bit different. So the base idea is that if you have a third-party dependency or something that uses the access token that is part of the Azure pipeline, so the service principal. So what I basically did is that I did a simulation where I kick off a poisoned pipeline, and this poisoned pipeline will get the access token via a dependency that has been poisoned to an attacker service. And this attacker service will then call Azure Resource Manager. So what Azure Sentinel does is that it looks in the Azure AD logs for the service principals and in the Azure Resource Manager. And it basically, if it sees that the token was gotten within 1 hour with the service principal in Azure pipeline, and it was used from another IP, not the pipeline's IP, it will create an alert event. So I just created, before we started this session, 2 such events here, and I'll just share them also on a window that has an example of those events. I could also quickly kick up the poisoned pipeline to create a new event for us. Let's just see, I'm not exposing any data here. I should not. Yeah, this is good. And this was something we did in another community project. So I'm opening Visual Studio Code. There's a repository for Azure AD Attack and Defense Playbook, which Sami, one of my colleagues, and Thomas Naunheim. So we've been doing these kind of scenarios. So basically, I'll just add something to the pipeline because I've created the code here, which will change settings on a storage account. And those settings, the change will come from another IP, not from the IP of the pipeline. So I'll just start this pipeline here, and I'll show how the pipeline looks once it's completed. So the pipeline is now running. Pipeline is called exfiltration. Just make sure that it's not exposing too much of access tokens, because this environment is not the honeypot environment I'm sharing on the other window. Yeah, the good part is that the authorization headers are not exposed in the pipeline. So just a second and I'll show. So the job is now almost completed on the DevOps side. And yeah, we would have had here an exposed token. So, but this one does not likely expose it. So I'll just quickly show the pipeline side. So basically what it does, it goes and looks into the service principal, which has been used here. And it creates an action in the bash side. And that action is then should surface within 15 minutes to Azure Sentinel. So here is the exfil phase, which does expose the access token. So I'm not bringing that up, but as I said, it's just a node dependency that sends the token to another service, which is not coming from the same IP than the pipeline agent itself. And on the Azure Sentinel side, then within around 15 minutes, we should have a new incident here. And the incident is something like this. So this is the previous incident. I did 30 minutes for it to look on the time. So what you can see here is basically that it detects the use of the connection outside the Azure pipeline. And the cool part is here, it's also showing the entities. So FAUG-spoof was the resource, that's a storage account, which it was creating. And this one is the account. So it can also show what other stuff the account did in Azure AD. In Azure. So this is the cool part here. And here it shows the different IPs that has been used. So these IPs, at least one of them is not matching the one from the DevOps pipeline. So highly recommended to do this. If you're using Azure AD tokens in your, DevOps pipelines, you should check that they are actually being also used from the pipeline IP. There might be some legitimate scenario also where you actually are forwarding the token somewhere. So this would then create alert from there, but generally you should be able to do most of the work with the Azure AD tokens inside the pipeline, and that would not be then raising any alerts because it's only looking for jobs, actions against Azure Resource Manager outside the pipeline. So I think this was the kind of third demo I had here for this use. I have one more, which is on auditing the applications themselves. So I'll just quickly bring that up as well. This is very much in the Azure AD part. So let's bring this demo up. And also demoing another small tool here, how to get tokens from Azure CLI from your browser. Just the use case I have. I'm not sure if it's useful for anyone else, but my use case is that if I'm logged on the browser already, for me, I can then get tokens from the browser to any Node.js process running here. So this is just a bit of a tool I am using. So let's share another window here. And let's just do you see a window on the base VM back.
Yes.
So once again, in the honeypot environment, so basically anything that is shared here is, I think we have a good verb name here in Finland for that. It's called Papa Riista. I'm not sure if it's free game, but basically anything I'm sharing here is something that if you're able to scrape the access tokens or anything else, you're actually able to use them. But I tried to account that by not putting any hard data here. So what I'll do now is I have Azure Session here open. And if I have Azure Session on the browser, I can take the tokens from the browser to my CLI client here. So this is very, very useful for me. So I'm just impersonating Azure CLI from the node process, which is running here now. And now I'm running audit against the applications that are in the tenant. And the output from here, what you would be seeing is then a Custo query, which I can then run against Log Analytics, which is one of my favorite services in Azure. So let's just put this on the run, and now it will create an audit of a user, the application type, application display name, application statistics. Some of the values are replicated because I'm just making this list here per user. So I really want to know if there is all principals have possibility of using Azure SQL via one application. So this would be a bit of a red flag if you had this in an actual environment. So in my case, this is an attacking service which I use against Azure SQL database. But if you see this in a live environment where all users in the tenant have been consented to applications to use impersonation to Azure SQL database, you might want to take a look at it. I mean, it's not necessarily malicious use case, but I haven't seen this in a live production. And then it will also get the audit data. So basically, as I said, this is a malicious application. It will read the SQL, and based on the SQL, it will also do some user management to take over some roles. So, and let's see if we have something else. We'll also show service principals, whether they are multi-tenant or single-tenant applications, and where they have permissions. So I would typically be looking at this assignment part here. Anything that has a user read write is something you probably want to take a look. And once again, it's the same offending app I created in this tenant. But I would say that these are what I wanted to demo, and it took roughly 40 minutes. So I'll just quickly go through what I had left in the presentation to sort of summarize these findings here. So just reshare the presentation on the previous PM I had here. Okay, and it should be coming up any moment now. Okay, so let's see. From the agenda, we went through the automatic deletion of resources. This was basically the idea that if you give retention time to a resource, you can have a solution that will then notify you when those resources should be deleted. So there is no risk of those going automatically, but I mean, that could be easily done. It would even make the solution easier where it would delete automatically, but maybe you have not updated the retention tag, then it's after 6 months, it would be actually gone automatically. So you basically want to maybe have that control where you delete that resource yourself. We already went through the auto diagnostics. Pasi had an excellent question of the propagation delay there. So there's not much propagation delay. That's good. Misuse of access tokens from Azure pipelines and creating inventory of apps. The last demo, SQLi, I think I'm not gonna do anymore here because that would be another 15 minutes, but it's something that Azure Security Center or Defender is very good at detecting. So some kind of basic things here to kind of summarize, and some things which are good to do is when you're using Azure AD solutions, try to use solutions that are binding to Azure AD identities. So this would be service principals in general, users that are authenticated and authorized against Azure AD, applications that are authenticated and authorized against Azure AD, and also compared to the airbag in Azure IAM. So solutions which are not those are basically SSA, keyed storage account keys, deploy credentials in the Kudu, FTP credentials. If you're using ACR, you have this default admin. And something that I see a lot used are just the plain database connection strings, even though managed identities are widely available in the major SDKs for .NET and Node. So I'm not sure why the use of database connection strings is so prevalent. There is one benefit though. If you're not using Azure AD integration at all in your solutions, if Azure AD is down, for your solution that is using the SQL, the database connection string would still work. So that's the only case I've seen for using database connection strings instead of Azure AD strings. Something else, I think this is something I've been kind of going through, securing web apps. So even if you're going with the functions, and this is mostly about functions here and cross-service security, you can increase a lot of the security by using non-HTTP triggers. If you have a possibility to use timers or event binding, such as the Event Hub binding, then there is no public service to secure. And if you're using HTTP triggers on functions, then I recommend using access restrictions on the serverless tiers. If you go then one tier up to the dedicated, you can then use private endpoints, and you can also reach downstream to other services via the Bayonet integration. So this is my kind of classic talk I have in any case where there is prevalent use of Azure functions. Okay, something else. This was a small joke. Around 1 hour before this session, all of the demos failed because my VSL solution doesn't like snapshots. So luckily I was able to figure that out. Maybe something else, don't put live data on the lab. Not a good practice. I tried to avoid it here. And maybe as an end, some calls to action, enable diagnostic loggings as much as you can. I don't see many cases where you wouldn't do that. There are some noisy services which do generate quite a lot of logs. You might put those logs in Azure storage instead. So you have some sort of log trail. And even if the log data is not important for the actions of the service, it might still show if the service was breached. So that's the main idea here for diagnostic loggings. Map out any solution that might bypass MFA or might bypass, let's say, a management interface. A good example is the DevOps pipelines, which I just showed. Very often they are not using certificate, so they are using password on the client credentials. So when they use just password, it brings the whole security of the tenant down because users are required to use strong authentication, but service principals are based on a string. So that string is typically something that is much more easily shared than a certificate. So I kind of would say that that's a possible MFA bypass. Enable Azure Defender for any PaaS solutions you have, because it's very unlikely that you have a good way of seeing what kind of threats are facing your PaaS solutions. So this would be SQL threat protection, web app threat protection, very useful. And also using Azure managed credentials. All the solutions I deployed today, once their expiration tag is showing 0, it will also delete the Azure managed credential. So there is no credentials for me to leak. But hey, this was my talk here, kind of lonely monologue, I would say, but I hope somebody enjoyed it.
Thank you. This was great. And if you still have any questions, you can write them in chat still. And Joosua, you had some GitHub links and that stuff, so we can add them into the description of this VOD later on. So anybody who wants them can take a look at them from there. But I think this session was pretty great. And for the next one, we have some data-related stuff coming up. So take a look at the meetup for that as soon as I'll have that updated. But thank you, Joosua. We'll end it from here.
Thank you. Thank you.